Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Amandine Lobelle from Paystack. I'm the head of business operations at Paystack, and I'm joined this morning or this evening, depending on where you are, by Wale Ayeni, who is the acting global head for venture capital at IFC. Wale, I don't know if you want to kick us off.
Thanks, Amandine, and thanks for the introduction. So I'll just go ahead and start. I think there's going to be a lively conversation. Just for background, Africa is kind of a nascent venture capital ecosystem per se, but last year was a bumper year for exits in Africa. About more than $1 billion was realized from exits in Africa, and Paystack definitely was a limelight of that. So in this conversation, it was just to have Amandine walk us a little bit through the process, how all of that happened. But before we get into all of that, I'll let Amandine give a quick background about kind of the Paystack journey and then her initial journey, how she landed in Nigeria, Africa, and Fintech. So Amandine, just give everybody kind of a background about yourself and then Paystack as well.
Yeah, thanks so much, Wale. And actually, I should also say that I've known Wale for about 5 years now. So it's really like a great pleasure to be doing this session with him. In terms of just me and my background, so as I said, my name is Amandine. I'm the head of business operations at Paystack. I am originally from Belgium, but moved around a lot growing up and spent a number of formative years in Africa. So I always knew that I would have a career on the continent. I started my career in investment banking and then moved more into the VC side. So I was actually a fintech investor for a number of years, and that's how I know Wale. I was a fintech investor at the IFC before joining Paystack. And I think the rationale, the catalyst for me was really, I could tell that there were so many great things going on in fintech in Africa. And as an investor, you're always seeing things from the outside in. You get to meet a lot of different companies, but you're not really seeing it from the inside out necessarily. And I think I was actually living in Nigeria working for IFC when I got to meet the Paystack team and was completely blown away by the team that had built this incredible company. This was back in 2018 that I first met the team, and was completely aligned with the mission that they were trying to solve, and it just felt like the right next step for me. So a little bit more about Paystack in particular. So we're an online payments company. We are headquartered in Lagos, Nigeria. We were founded about 5 years ago. And the company is really very simple. We're just trying to help merchants accept payments from their customers. So we do that through an omni-channel acceptance platform, whether it's card, bank transfer, mobile money, which is big in Africa. I think in the last 5 years, we've grown significantly. So Paystack today is doing more per month in terms of monthly volumes than the entire country of Nigeria was doing when we started. So I think we've grown significantly. We're about 130 people now based across the continent. So the countries in which we are present is Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, and soon a few others, hopefully. And yeah, I think that the mission of the company is very simple. It's just to help African merchants grow their business. We want to try and accelerate digital commerce. We want to try and accelerate digital payments. And one of the exciting things that happened to us last year was an acquisition by Stripe, which we'll talk about in more detail, but really that's helping us achieve that mission. I think it was a perfect opportunity and it was a natural moment for us to continue building on what we had already created. And with Stripe, I think we will get there even faster.
Thanks for that background. I promised I wasn't going to ask you tough questions, so don't worry. I'm not going to ask you how much your Stripe stock are worth today. But let's go back kind of the acquisition, because it's not every day that you see an acquisition in Africa, particularly during the pandemic. So maybe a few questions about that. How did the conversation originate? And then kind of what were the top 3 challenges you guys had in closing down an acquisition during when the COVID, where kind of the world was locked down?
Yeah. So on your first question, like how did the acquisition actually come about? I think it was a very natural progression of a pre-existing relationship. So both Stripe and Paystack are alumni of Y Combinator. Paystack was actually the first Nigerian startup to get into YC. Obviously, Stripe was able to do that a few years before us. And then Stripe actually led the Series A that Paystack had in 2018. So we raised a Series A in 2018. Stripe was the lead investor alongside Visa and Tencent. And so over the last 2 to 3 years, we've really been working very closely with them. They were our largest investor. They were our largest partner. And it was a very natural progression of that relationship. So I think both CEOs have a very good relationship. And the conversation happened very organically. Paystack was not for sale per se, but it just felt that both companies are very mission aligned. They're very culturally aligned. And it just felt like this, if our mission is really to help boost and develop digital commerce, digital payments on the continent, this is the best way in which we can really achieve that mission. So that was kind of like how the acquisition came about. In terms of your second question on how we were actually able to pull off an acquisition during COVID. So one thing I should say is the conversation actually started before COVID, but of course, very quickly the world went into lockdown, and so we had to adjust the way that we were running the process. I think ideally it would have been a couple of weeks of due diligence on site in Nigeria. Unfortunately, all of that moved to Zoom. So we had remote DD, we had digital DD sessions, which stretched a little bit longer than just an intense few days on site. I think the top 3 challenges were probably, number one, just the logistics behind running due diligence remotely. So there's a 9-hour time difference between San Francisco and Lagos. So there's just like a very obvious logistical challenge. Either someone is going to be waking up very early or another party is going to be working super late. So that was something that we had to navigate and figure out pretty quickly. I think the second thing was just the running a business. So a due diligence can be, or an acquisition can actually take quite a bit of time because, of course, both parties need to get comfortable. But at the same time, you're running your business and you don't want to be too distracted from that execution, right? So I guess the second challenge was just like finding a balance and still navigating like challenges from COVID, moving the entire company to remote work, but still being able to run that process in the background. And then the third thing, I don't know if there's a third thing. I think, to be honest, it was a very friendly due diligence process. I can't think of a third challenge. If anything, I think that Paystack actually learned a lot from the process. I think Stripe is where Stripe is 5 years ago is where we are today. So we kind of looked up to them as a big brother and could very easily learn from how they had built their business over the last 10 years. And I guess maybe like the third challenge then is kind of internalizing that knowledge and applying it to our local reality. That's maybe the third takeaway or challenge.
Did people fly down during COVID for DD, or this was all remote?
No, unfortunately, ideally they would have done. I think there was a team of Stripes that was planning to come to Nigeria, but unfortunately, there was no travel that was allowed during COVID. So everything, the whole process was fully remote.
That's quite impressive, and that's kind of where trust comes in, given that you guys have had a long-term relationship. But I'm going to switch gears now and ask a more difficult question. Where, given that Africa is the youngest continent, 60% of the people are under the age of 24. Africa, in my view, and I'm biased, is obviously the future. So it makes sense for Stripe to acquire Paystack. The question, however, is that why did it make sense for Paystack to sell? Like, what was the reasoning behind the sale?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think, again, the two co-founders are very mission driven. We're a very mission driven company, but the two co-founders in particular, the reason they get out of bed in the morning is because they want to fix payments in Africa. And when that is your mindset and just like your philosophy in terms of how you're building your business. Partnering with, one of the most sophisticated, if not the most sophisticated payments company on the planet, and one of the largest tech companies, can really help us accelerate that mission. So I think for us it was more, why not now? This is actually going to help us get from A to Z faster than if we were doing it ourselves. We're actually going to be able to learn from their experiences, and the best aspect was that we were still fully independent. So we're still Paystack, but we're also part of a larger Stripe family. And so we can leverage on those learnings and just really accelerate our mission in a much faster way.
Yeah, and to that point though, maybe it'll be good to also talk about kind of how is life now? Because when you go to Africa, there's a bunch of startups. It's quite fragmented. A lot of people are scared of merging or what that actually means. So post merger, how has life changed? How hasn't it changed? What's better? What's worse? Kind of like how can founders get comfort around saying, mergers and acquisition? That's not the end of the world. So maybe it'll be good to hear from your experience post merger, how things have not changed.
Of course. And unfortunately, I don't have a massively controversial answer for you, because to be honest, it's exactly the same as it was before. So Paystack, as an entity, we're fully independent. The brand continues. Nothing has actually changed in terms of the day-to-day. Our org chart hasn't changed. We're just now part of like a larger family. So in terms of the actual day-to-day, I think nothing in terms of our operations have changed overnight. We just have access to a lot more knowledge and insight and know-how. I think some of the conversations I've had in the last 2-3 months with like our Stripe colleagues have completely changed the way that I'm now thinking about expansion on the continent, for example. So it's really like the best of both worlds, to be honest. And I think in terms of how founders can get comfortable, obviously there are multiple different M&A structures, right? And there are multiple different exits. I think for us, this just worked very, very well because Stripe recognized that we had actually already built a lot of brand credibility, a lot of trust with our merchants, and they just wanted to help amplify that. They didn't want to, change what we had already been doing. And if anything, they just wanted to give us more firepower to execute. So I guess, the philosophy needs to align at the top. And I think the two CEOs were very much aligned that in order for Paystack to be successful, this was the best, structure for us to go about the acquisition.
No, that's good. I was not looking for something controversial, just because the less controversial there is in Africa, the better. So I'm happy that it all worked out well. So what's next for Paystack? What's Paystack in the next five years?
Yeah, I think so. Our mission is a Pan-African mission. The problem that we are solving, we started in Nigeria, and I think we've gone very deep in our home market. But the problem that we are solving is not a Nigerian problem. It's a Pan-African problem. So I think we probably have 3 different priorities. And the first one is really digging into what I just said about this being a Pan-African problem. So I think expansion is a massive priority for us. I'm actually in Kenya at the moment working on our expansion to East Africa. So that's like...
Is that breaking news, or that's already known? Are you making news about it? That's an expansion.
No, I think like many people know that those are our ambitions. We probably haven't posted it on the website, but I think it's not a secret. Okay. So I'm actually in East Africa at the moment. But so rapid expansion. Africa is 54 countries. I think part of what we need to figure out is how to build like a global, or how to plug into like a global payment treasury network, which is something that also Stripe is building, and make it easier to transact within countries, across the continent, and then between the continents and the rest of the world. I think that's one massive challenge that we really need to figure out. So that's one priority. Second priority is probably more on the product development side. So right now, our primary product is online payments, but we can really take that much further. So I think the payments ecosystem is massive, and I think we've just started with helping merchants collect payments, but there's actually many more things that we can do to help them grow their business. And then the third priority is probably on the reliability front. So we've grown, as I said, we're doing now 5 times what the entire country was doing when we started 5 years ago. So we've grown exponentially. But I think with that, there are additional challenges to make sure that your reliability actually grows exponentially with the size, with the volumes that you're actually processing. So I think the third thing is probably the least sexy one, but probably the most important, because payments is so foundational. Regardless of what business line you have, you need to be able to accept payments from your customers. So reliability is actually probably the most important thing that we can be working on as a company.
Yeah, thanks for that. The one thing I'm actually curious about, you mentioned a few things there, but maybe if you can just expound a little bit on kind of the treasury product that you're thinking about and how that parlays into like an African opportunity. So it would be good to like explain that a little bit more.
I think, and Wale, you probably know this better than most people, but most of African trade is actually, if I think of Kenya, for example, their largest trade partners are probably not their neighboring countries. And I think part of that is just because it's not actually easy to move goods, services, capital across the continent. Luckily, there's now an Africa Free Trade Agreement that is just starting in early 2021, which is great in terms of goods and services, and we can think about tax breaks to encourage that. But a big part of commerce between countries in Africa is also going to be facilitated by payments. So I think the way we are looking at it is when we talk about expansion, it's not just about replicating our success in individual countries. It's also how do we connect those countries? How do we make it easy for a Ghanaian merchant to accept payments from a South African customer? Because I think that's really when we'll see trade within the continent magnify. I think that's one of the biggest blockers that still exist.
That's great. And then I'll switch gear again to another topic, which is now that you've been acquired by Stripe, you're looking at expanding and creating a Pan-African opportunity and profile. I mean, I get a lot of startups that are doing fintech that reach out to me all the time to get investments. Can I send them to you for you to buy them? How are you thinking about organic versus inorganic growth?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not something that we've dabbled into yet, but I won't completely rule it out. So I think there are a couple of ways in which you can see it. It's either going to be on the geographic side or on complementary product side. Again, won't rule it out. It's not an active part of our strategy, but I think if you can find a team that again is culturally aligned and where the mission is similar to what we're doing, or it's adjacent but complementary to our efforts. I think we would definitely consider inorganic growth. But that said, there's nothing active in the works at the moment.
Okay. And given kind of your hat, which you got into Africa as an investor, now you're an operator, I think you're well positioned to actually talk about kind of the African fintech opportunity and what the ecosystem is. Because fintech is huge. There are few people, in my view, that understand the African opportunity. But given kind of all your experience, it would be good to like just parlay kind of what's the fintech opportunity in Africa. What is it today? What was it before? What is it today? And where do you think the opportunity is going to be, or where that trajectory is going to be 5 to 10 years from now?
Yeah. Let me try and remember all of your questions. You might have to remind me. But no, so let's start with like the African opportunity and then how fintech plays into that. I fully agree with you, Wale. I think Africa is the future. I think there is so much potential. I think 17 of the top 20 fastest growing countries are in Africa. It's the youngest population. it's going to be, I think Nigeria in particular, for example, is going to be the third largest population by 2050. So it's just a very...
I hope we'll find a way not to make that happen, but that's the
more Nigerians on the planet. Yeah, because it's 200 million now, and by 2050 it'll be larger than the US. So all that to say that I think like there's just so much potential. It's a very young population, very fast growing, and I think when it comes to fintech in particular, so financial services is the backbone, like the foundation of an economy, right? I already mentioned it, but regardless of what business you're building, and we see a lot of different diversified tech companies in Africa, whether it's health tech, ed tech, e-logistics, regardless, there always has to be a fintech angle, right? Because that is actually what makes commerce go around. And I think Paystack in particular is building that infrastructure, right? Like it's making it easy for merchants to transact online. It's making it easy for merchants to transact online and for merchants to collect payments from their customers, whether it's website, mobile app, or even offline payments. So I think in terms of the fintech opportunity, for me, it's really ground zero. We're still there's still a lot of individuals that are financially excluded from the ecosystem. So I think in Nigeria, for example, only 40% of the adult population is banked. And so when you see that, there's just a lot of room for technology to play a role to try to facilitate and accelerate that development. So yeah, I mean, for me, Africa is the future. Fintech is foundational. So when you put those two together, there's just massive opportunities, whether that's in the B2B space, B2C space. Yeah, I don't know if I've answered all of your questions. I think I forgot.
No. I think you answered half, but I'll repeat the last one. Kind of, where do you see 5 to 10 years from now? Because just historically, a bunch of people have gone to kind of the usual suspects: Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, maybe Egypt. But Africa is 54 countries. It's Francophone Africa. Kind of, where's kind of the fintech opportunity? Where's that going?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think, to be honest, I think what we will continue seeing is a lot of activity, and especially like investment activity in those hubs that you've already mentioned. But from there will be expansion or coverage into some of those regional areas. So South Africa for Southern Africa, Kenya for East Africa, Nigeria, and then maybe Francophone Côte d'Ivoire, Senegal for Francophone West Africa. So I think in the immediate future, there will still be a lot of activity, a lot of concentration, a lot of innovation in the hubs, but increasingly we're seeing that be a little bit more diversified. So even if we just look at Y Combinator, for example, I think in this cohort, there's a Francophone West African tech startup, and it's the first one from Francophone Africa. That's not something we would have seen 2-3 years ago, and it's super, super exciting. So I think we will see that those hubs become slightly less important over time, but in the immediate future, I would still imagine most of the innovation, most of the investment still going into the 4 or 5 big cities that you've already mentioned.
I was about to say, now that you guys have made money for YC Combinator, do you get like lifelong invitations to demo days? Do you get to see?
I think as an alumni of YC,
you
get lifelong invitation regardless. You don't even need.
That's true. But yeah. The other question I had is, given that acquisitions are far and few in between, and it's just starting out now. I know, although 2020 was like a bumper year for Africa, given I think 3 or 4 acquisitions that happened in tech space. The question I had is kind of, what was the ecosystem reception to that? From your view, from your vantage point, how did the ecosystem react to one of its own being acquired and having a liquidity event?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think, as you know, Wale, I think there's an abundance of talent in Africa, but obviously opportunity is not necessarily evenly distributed. So I think this was a huge validation for the ecosystem. I remember when we announced, just following Twitter, and it was, people were celebrating from Cape Town to Cairo. Everyone was kind of claiming it as a win, for the continent, for the ecosystem, for technology, because this was really a homegrown company. It was a really homegrown team, and I think from the very beginning, the founders were just really focused on building a very great business, and I think this acquisition just showed that if you can be focused and if you can really just spend every day building a world-class company, that even the most sophisticated of tech companies like Stripe can be interested in that, and value can be created for the entire ecosystem. So I think it was massively positive. I think it was encouraging. It was a validation, and I hope it's just the start of more of what may come.
Yeah, from my vantage point, what I found exciting, and I think in every ecosystem, there's always a few seminal events that elevates the entire ecosystem to the next phase. And given that kind of I'm an investor, I've started seeing a lot of ex-alumni from Paystack that are starting their own companies. And that's kind of what you typically see in San Francisco, which is kind of people getting the confidence, getting some sort of money to go, start, build something else. So I think for the ecosystem, I think that the impact was, practical, and it was kind of real. And I'm sure everybody will experience it in different ways, but from kind of my kind of where I sit, I saw a bunch of that. So that was great.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Super encouraging.
Yeah. So the other question I have is did you guys sell early?
Yeah, you're not the first person to ask me that question. I don't think we. And again, if you think of the mission just being to accelerate digital payments on the continent, and really we are just impatient to deliver on that mission, I think this is one of the fastest ways that we can get there. So for me, it was really just a natural progression of a relationship. It felt like the right time. It was a wonderful opportunity to keep doing what we were doing, to keep building what we had been building, but just with more support and with more knowledge and expertise. So no, I think that, we've been doing this for 5 years. We're now excited for the next chapter, the next 5 years. And this is just an inflection point in Paystack's journey.
Yeah. And then from the ecosystem itself, because I know there was a liquidity event and there was a bunch of angels, and I think some people got, it's good validation that angels can now go invest in other things as well. And I'm not sure if you would notice in that, but has there been a bunch of validation for the angel investors? Because for any ecosystem, I think the angel investors, particularly the local ones, are the ones that need to take the first risk. And given where Paystack started from, and you said it before, actually today, where you're now doing 5x what the entire country was doing 5 years ago. But 5 years ago, it wasn't a sure bet. It was, most of the people that I invested, but it was a risky bet. So have you seen any validation on kind of this exit helping the angel ecosystem develop, grow, do more things? Yeah. Kind of what's your view on that in particular?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I fully agree. I fully endorse that. I think, again, in 2016, Paystack was the first company to get into YC, the first tech startup in Nigeria to get into YC. And now there have been 20 of them, right? So you're right that those angel investors that wrote small checks in 2016, there wasn't much precedent to go off. And I think even in the last 5 years, we've seen tremendous development in angel investors, angel investing communities, also accelerators. I think accelerators have doubled in the last 5 years on the continent as well. I think there's around 650 of them now, and there were less than 300 5 years ago. So, and you're right, we need that early stage ability to write those checks when you're really just talking about an idea and you're really just backing a founder. And is this a good market? Do I think that this business have legs? Do I think that this can grow and solve a problem? I think that is really a critical piece in the investment. And it's probably the biggest gap in Africa, to be honest, because we're seeing more funds that are coming in Series A, Series B, but those early checks are actually what will make and break a company in those early days. And I think, again, this will give validation that individuals that can write $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 checks, that money can actually go far, and it can actually help get a business off the ground.
And then from a trajectory, what's your expectation that we'll see more exits and in Africa and fintech? And if it's, I'm guessing you're going to say yes, that's a softball. But if it's a yes, how will this exit look like? Like, what's kind of your prognosis? I'm sure you don't have a crystal ball, but just your insight about what you think we'll see down the road.
I don't have a crystal ball. I think we will see more exits. It's also the fact that the ecosystem is maturing, right? So we're now seeing more even Series B, Series C fundraisers. So the whole ecosystem is maturing, and so we will start to see those exits that we hadn't seen 3, 4, 5 years ago when tech was even more nascent than it is today. I think exits will probably still be acquisitions. It will probably still be strategics. There've been a couple of IPOs in the last few years, but I think in terms of exits, it'll still be on the M&A side rather than public listings. And then either existing African companies that are buying other African companies, or more of kind of the Stripe Paystack scenario, which is both companies very mission aligned, very culturally aligned, but just operating in very different geographies. So it makes sense to pair up from that perspective. I don't know. I don't think I've given you a very straight answer, but to summarize, I think we will see more exits. I think either as a result of this acquisition, but also because the entire ecosystem is maturing. I think it will be more M&A than IPOs, and I think that M&A can be both domestic and international.
And then we're coming to the end. I think we have 7 more minutes, so I'll be nice and throw you a few softballs. What will be your advice to founders, per se, particularly the ones that are scared of M&A, people that haven't done it before, people that are scared, people that are skeptical? Kind of what will be your advice to them?
It's actually really simple. Just keep focused on the mission. People don't build companies to be acquired, right? They don't build companies to exit. The good ones, in fact, if you just focus on building a good business, investors will come to you and opportunities will come to you. But it takes a lot to just stay focused and stay on the course and just really just prioritize things that you can actually control. There's a lot of things that cannot be controlled, whether that's other fundraising, whether that's COVID, whether that's other thing that's happening in the market. But just focus on the things that you can actually control. And I think if every day a founder is just building a good business and just doing a little bit more every day to actually build something solid, then after time that will have created value. So it's actually nothing earth-shattering, but it's more just like staying the course and being focused and just prioritizing things that are within their control.
Yeah, and then how is life without having to deal with investors? There's one life where because if you're a startup, you got to think about your second raise, Series A, Series B. You got to talk to investors. You got to chase. You got to talk about runway. And I see, Amandine, you're definitely smiling a lot more now than you were before the acquisition, because I guess you have a balance sheet. But what's the difference now that you don't have to do the whole dog and pony shows with investors and
exactly. I think that when you ask was the time right and why the founders decided to do this, that's also, you can just tell the founder, you'll never have to fundraise again. It's actually pretty attractive because it can be very time consuming. It can be a massive distraction. But no, I think again, my role shifted from investor relations and then kind of trying to coordinate the acquisition, and now just making sure that our priorities are aligned and we have all of the resources that we need to execute on our mission. So it's wonderful. It's less external coordination, and yeah, I definitely don't miss having to write investor updates, and email all the dozens of people on our cap table.
And then the last question, just around people. You're kind of expanding now. You're growing. You have a Pan-African strategy. Kind of, what are the kind of people you guys are trying to bring in? How are you guys thinking about people? How are you trying to kind of grow the team and capture the opportunity in front of you?
Yeah. So we're actually, we were very remote friendly before COVID, and I think that's just been accelerated with COVID. So today we're about 135 people. I'd say maybe 100 or so are in Nigeria and 35 are outside of Nigeria. And those 35 are probably spread across 8 different countries. So I think we are very aggressive on talent, and we recognize that talent may be sitting in different locations. So I think the rule of thumb that we have is as long as someone is plus or minus 3 hours time zone from Lagos, which is where the majority of our people are based, we can have that conversation. So I think if anything, COVID has actually made it a lot easier to hire people, whether they're in Europe, Middle East, Africa, but just hire really great talent. For example, engineers. So we now have engineers across, I don't know how many different countries, maybe 5 or 6 different countries. And it's working really well. So I think, in terms of the talent we're looking for, engineering talent is always something that we're looking for. PMs is something we're always looking for, but also very senior individual contributors, ICs, that can just help drive the business forward. And with pretty agnostic as to where they live. San Francisco is probably a little bit too far. As I said, time zone.
It's a 9 hour, at 9 or 10, I can't remember, but yeah, it's 9 hours.
Yeah. If it's plus or minus 3 hours from Lagos, it's fair game for us.
Yeah, okay, that's good. And then just the last question, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. So you said your strategy is Pan-African. Do you ever see Paystack going outside of Africa? Maybe not the US, but the other emerging markets, or is the core focus just capturing the African opportunity right now?
To be honest, I think Africa is such a massive opportunity that for the foreseeable future, it really is double down, all in on Africa. As you said, 54 different countries. Each of those have a different regulatory environment. Each of those have a different market that you need to understand and crack. So I think we'll be busy for plenty time. And yeah, I think our opportunity is really the African or the Pan-African opportunity.
And given that I work with the IFC, I have to ask this question. I just remembered: regulations. How has your experience been, and how are the regulators understanding? How is their understanding of innovation? Are they embracing a lot more fintech? Obviously, there's some countries that you've been in, but as you're going deeper and deeper, is that awareness a lot more open now, or is there still some challenges there per se?
Yeah, I think it's a process. So the first thing is that we've actually seen a lot of regulatory change in the payments landscape in the last 3 to 4 years. So Ghana just introduced new legislation 2 years ago. Something will probably follow in South Africa and Kenya in the next couple of years. So you can see that regulators are starting to understand payments a little bit more, and that understanding translates to more licensing and more regulation, which is not necessarily a bad thing, right? Like you do need to make sure that if you're providing financial services, that there are the right protections, the right infrastructure, the right security processes and procedures in place. In terms of, do I see them supporting innovation? I think it really depends from one regulator to another. We do see some sandboxes now in a couple of different countries, but they've not necessarily been as readily adopted as in other markets around the world. So I think it's probably a mixed bag.
Yeah, thanks for that. Just want to say thank you. I think we're out of the clock now, but we've run out of the clock. But it was great to have this conversation live. And I guess once COVID is over, champagne on you. We have to celebrate the acquisition there. And say hi to the Paystack. The best of luck.
Thanks.
Take care.